forward to it.
We'll have more about that. All right. Do we have Kyle ready?
Yeah, he should be on the line.
What's happening, Kyle?
What's going on, guys?
Hey, man. Welcome to what will eventually be the Let's Be Real podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So the reason that I had you on, the reason that I asked you on is that, first of all, I wanted to issue a pretty genuine apology to you because at some point, we talked a lot over Twitter back and forth, and I had mentioned this on the last show that we did. We used to, talk back and forth a lot more over Twitter and stuff like that, and then the Gamergate thing happened. And I feel like that was a bit of a not just it wasn't like a breakdown in our relationship, because it's like we've hung out since then and it's not like we're not cool, but I do feel like there was there was a bit of a division,
a fracture
between the two of us. Yeah. So I mean, I wanted to first apologize for my own dickish behavior. In that equation, because I was definitely being a dick. But I also thought that this would be an interesting time now that we're 2 or 3 years removed from it to actually kind of
Year 3, surprisingly.
3?
Yeah, we just tripped 3.
Holy shit. Now that we're 3 years past it, I think that it's an interesting thing to kind of go back on. And because we were on different sides of the debate, kind of talk about, the less emotional aspects of it and more, as time has kind of shown us, a bit more factual based discussion. So appreciate having you on, man.
Thank you for having me. It's definitely a conversation I think we need to have, especially in the current climate we're in.
Oh boy.
And hopefully this could start mending some bridges between the true groups.
Yeah, because okay, so for those that aren't really aware about what the hornet's nest of Gamergate is, I'm not going to bother contextualizing it for you, because I'm going to have to leave it on you to sort of read the various different sources that exist out there, because again, I come at it from a bit of a biased perspective, because I was kind of involved in the discussion around it. So that being said, let's kind of all operate off of the common context, because we all lived through it, that we all kind of know what Gamergate is. We don't have to bother explaining who Zoe Quinn is, and we don't have to bother explaining what why people were saying but it was actually about ethics in games journalism. You know what I mean? We all kind of get what happened. So I just sort of feel like I wanted to talk as humans, as gamers, as people who were there when it happened, and just kind of look back on it and sort of figure out what it was all about. So if you need to do the research, pause this episode, come back to it. I don't know, whatever you got to do, and do a little bit of research to figure out what Gamergate is, and then come back for this discussion. So I do agree with you, Kyle. I do think that this is a very important discussion given our current climate, and so much of what I heard at the time, and this is not necessarily from you, but so much of what I heard at the time was, well, I don't want politics in my video games. And which was a very childish response to a very complicated and nuanced problem. And I think now, 3 years removed, being a little more mature and a little bit more adults, why that point of view is kind of invalid, because games don't get to exist in a bubble outside of politics. Games are part of life, and therefore politics is a part of life. We can't, separate the two. So, from I guess that's from my perspective where I'm coming from. Was that something that you also heard around the same time, Kyle?
Yeah, most certainly. It's one of those. Gamergate was a very interesting problem, because it began as you said before, the Zoe situation and all that jazz. But then what really fired it off was the Gamers Are Dead articles, which came out about a couple weeks later after the Quinn stuff died down.
Oh, I forgot about that.
After all that went down, and after we saw about 12 different websites reporting the same exact thing, everybody went, wait a minute, that's really odd. Why are all these websites within a 24-hour period posting the same exact thing? So that really what kicked Gamergate off into motion was that event.
Well, and the problem is that, you know, the concept, the idea that it's about ethics in games journalism was not something that was ever lost on me, and was actually a sentiment that I very much agreed with. You know, like, anyone who's been consuming game media for any amount of time knows how fucked up this game is that we play, of either trying to get review copies so that we could beat other people to the punch, or, you know, trying to get exclusive interviews and having to sign a whole bunch of NDAs and all of this other bullshit. You know, we've known for a long time, at least going back to goddamn GamePro, that reviews are suspect, and that a game can get very high review marks but actually be a completely shit game. You know, so I felt like that argument, especially at that time, held, you know, it lost the moral authority to make it after coming in the wake of something like Zoe Quinn. And I understand why Zoe Quinn's, you know, why that kind of exposed the behavior that is fucked up. And I do agree that behavior is fucked up. But then that gets kind of thrown into the same pot and conflated with someone like Anita Sarkeesian, who really didn't have much of a dog in the fight overall than an opinion that was mostly rooted in third wave feminism. And like, her entire media project was something entirely different, and then it got rolled into this whole conversation. And that's where things started to get obscured, where you got, oh, well, it's about ethics in games journalism. And over on the other side, you had, well, but look at all of these fucking women in the games industry that no longer feel comfortable working in their industry, in their field.
Well, Sarkeesian, I think the incident with Sarkeesian that came up, I think she was scheduled to speak at Ohio State regarding what you talked about. And apparently she received some sort of threats. Those threats were investigated by the Ohio State Police. They were deemed as non-credible, but she canceled anyway. And around the same time as when the Gamers Are Dead articles came out.
Right.
So that's kind of how she got lumped into the whole equation, unfortunately, which is...
Because the view of Gamergate as it evolved was sort of like an anti-women's movement, or a pushback against feminism or women in the game industry. And I think that was also a pretty unfair misnomer to label that idea as centralized around. I don't think that it necessarily was. But there were so many people obscuring that point that, listen, this is messed up, the way that, you know, stories proliferate around games and in the games journalism field, that it almost made it a parody of its own point.
Definitely. That's exactly what that was. And it kind of evolved a lot. Like, the original thinking was ethics in game journalism, but as Gamergate grew and more research was done and more digging was done, and it was basically a bottomless pit. Every time you hit something, the chasm just gets bigger. And what we ended up finding out was, well, it was less about ethics in game journalism as it was a ideological war against the so-called radical left.
You know, I like the way that you just put that, how it's basically been this bottomless pit, because anyone listening right now who maybe didn't pause to go do the research, who's just listening here, just got 3 different stages of what Gamergate was supposed to be. We don't want politics in our games. Oh, we want ethics in games journalism. Oh, now we're going to dox and send death threats to all the women in games. Like, the whole thing, honestly, from start to finish is pretty messed up.
And the thing is that, you know, you'll get a lot of people now, even now, who are like, well, the doxing and death threats didn't happen. They did fucking happen. They
did.
They absolutely happened because I got death threats. I got death threats in my own. You're
posting on Twitter or something, right?
Through Twitter, I got 4 death threats, and I had at least 2 people call my work at that time.
Wow.
Now,
really?
Yeah, fortunately, I worked at NPR, and they knew very much about the story. And I was like, there are people trying to harass me to get you guys to fire me, and they were like, well, we're absolutely not going to do that. But you know, when it's an individual, even, you know, dude, I'm not verified on Twitter. I have a modest audience. I don't have a gigantic audience, but when all I do is, you know, speak out about some fucked up shit that's going on, and I get fucking, you know, death threats, and I get people calling my work, like, dude, like,
that's some concerted effort right there.
It is. And that shit happened a lot, all the fucking time.
Yeah, the one that I remember that kind of, you know, really jumped out at me the most was when someone had asked Felicia Day what she thought, and she just said, I got no opinion on it, and they doxed her anyway for not having an opinion on it.
I mean, and, you know, I think that was a lot of the behavior that made people either walk away from Gamergate that were initially, you know, supporters of the idea that, you know, we do need a more open and free game journalism source. And then people started to jerk themselves off and think that, you know, oh, I'm going to make a Twitch channel, so I'm going to make my own home for game. And that's sort of like, that's kind of how we get the current environment that we do. Because you're right, people don't trust GameSpot, people don't trust IGN, but they make pretty good content. But that's starting to be democratized. Now you've got, you know, MatPat making very good content. You know what I mean? You've got streamers that are able to make, you know, radio shows and share their opinions. And so that's sort of, I sort of feel like at least Twitch in some way was a bit of a reaction to Gamergate, and not a wholly good one either. Kyle, you got any thoughts on that? I feel like we're not giving you a word totally in edgewise here.
I'm thinking everything. Effectively, what it did was it created 2 very fractioned groups of people. It created people that were wholly against Gamergate, bought into the narrative that it was all about harassing women and female game developers and journalists and everyone else, and it was just so abhorrent to behold. And then you have another camp that's like, no, there's an ideological push coming into our industry that doesn't need to be there or doesn't need to be forced. And then you have people in the middle like, can't we fix this rationally? And the people in the middle cannot have a voice, especially in the climate they're in. You're either for or against the idea. And if you dare to mention a dissenting opinion, regardless of what side you're on, that's where you get the doxing. That's where you get the harassment. And for the longest time, you couldn't even have a conversation about it without fear of someone jumping down your throat.
You know,
or
that's exactly why I stayed totally silent during it. I was like, I can't handle.
You know, here's one of the issues that I have, Kyle, and since obviously you mentioned there's 2 sides to it. There's the people who were all about harassing, you know, women in whether it was journalism or the game developers, and that's not what the idea was originally about. But they co-opted it for their cause, and there were some people that still wanted to stay attached to that because what it started out as obviously, you know, really meant something to them. But at what point, when people like what you see in the alt-right start to co-opt your idea, when they start to take your identity and it's starting to take hold, it's passing off, you know, people look at Gamergate and they go, that's all about abusing women. At what point do you then like give up? You know, if you, you know, imagine anyone, and I'm sorry to draw this parallel, but it's just the first one that popped into my head, you know. But if you're you know, you're one of these people out here wanting to, you know, protect yourself and your rights and your culture and stuff like that and blah blah blah, and you're going around doing what you can, and then the next thing you know, the guy next to you is doing Nazi salutes and handing you swastika armbands to put on, like at what point, when people start to co-opt your cause for something evil, do you step away from it?
That is literally the most difficult question about this entire thing. It's a lot of the issues that came about with harassment and doxing is that for the longest time, Gamergate tried to self-police. They actually had a specialized group on Twitter that would mass report bot accounts that were doxing or were harassing other people to try to get them banned. But that unfortunately fell through because it wasn't generating any goodwill because no one was reporting on it. And B, it was just so large that it was very difficult to actually maintain. So at the same time, it's really, at one hand, if you walk away from, oh, this is too toxic, I gotta go, is that sacrificing your own point of view, even though you believe that the original cause you're fighting for is right? Or does that make you, stronger for sticking in because even through the shenanigans and the bullshit, you still stuck by the cause you originally fought for?
Well, I think that line becomes very clear when the people that you're arguing with are also arguing points like that white genocide exists. Like I think that's the point where I was like, oh, it's very clear where these lines are drawn. And so you end up drawing those same kind of lines around the people who are arguing those same points. And I understand that, again, this is nuanced and that there were people who, for them, it was not about harassing women and were absolutely mortified at some of the shit that got sent to people like Brianna Wu and Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn. I get that. But at the same time, I also understand how people would see that and go, this is not for fucking me. And this is not what I signed up for. And eventually that's sort of what ended up killing the argument. And in the end, those articles almost ended up being right. Like those articles about the death of the gamer almost ended up being prophetic. And the subtext of those articles, guys, the subtext of those articles, I have to say, is the breakdown of tribalism, which is actually something that we're actually seeing right now. If Donald Trump has done nothing for us as a country, he has gotten us to start talking to each other again from outside our little circles and boxes that we've put ourselves in. And we put ourselves into them. That's not anyone else. Someone else can come in and go, faggot, and put you into a box. Okay? But these are boxes that we put ourselves into, whether it's goth, whether it's juggalo, whether it's punk, whether it's fucking metalhead, whether it's hip hop head, whether it's, and a lot of these fall along interest lines, whether it's gamer, whether it's a movie buff, whether you're a hipster, whether you're all of these different groups, that's all fucking tribalism. And all of this shit is tribalism breaking down. And that's really what I saw Anita Sarkeesian as, is one of the first breakdowns of that tribalism. Because here's someone who's a feminist and a scholar who has an interest in video games, is trying to combine the two. And look at the firestorm that she absolutely accidentally walked the fuck into.
Well, to be fair, a lot of her opinions were really bad.
That's fine. That's fine. Guess what? It's the internet. You're allowed to have shitty opinions.
Absolutely are.
You know who else has bad opinions, Nika?
Everyone. Literally everyone. Whatever happened to the whole saying, opinions are like assholes? Everyone has them and they all stink.
Unless you bleach it.
Okay.
You still have one and it still probably stinks.
Then it smells like bleach.
It doesn't stink as much, and sometimes I want to put a tongue in it, but that's different.
I hear that's standard nowadays.
Listen, analingus.
But not with tinfoil.
Listen, I don't know how we got here, but analingus, let me tell you, that's a trend among the kids.
Coming back
you don't want to give them your marriage hole. You want to give them your, you don't want to give them your forever hole. You want to be able to give them
the temporary hole?
No, the bleached chocolate surprise.
Okay, anyway, going back to this idea of...
I think bleaching is supposed to remove the chocolate surprise.
Well, no, but the chocolate is like, it's got a chocolate gooey center.
It's not supposed to. That's
No,
what the bleach is for.
you're right. It's not supposed to, but every once in a while, it happens.
Going back to your point about tribalism.
You don't want to hold on anal bleaching?
Nope, I sure don't.
Do you want to know if I bleach my butthole?
No, I don't.
No, none of us want to know that.
Do you have a recommendation on bleach?
I mean,
brands?
I do.
Stop.
Because some of them are really harsh.
Yeah, I was figuring I was just gonna use like the Store brand to save a couple bucks.
Shave first.
Shave?
Oh yeah,
dude, I've heard like stories of shaving your butthole that just like ends terribly. What?
Nika looks so bored and angry.
Nika.
I refuse to be part of this conversation. Robbie, what were you about to say?
This episode is going to be titled "Your Forever Hole." I want you guys to know that. Going back to what you were talking about tribalism, right? Now, obviously, yes, in some cases, stuff like that can be very detrimental. But when you break it down into some of the ones that you did, movie buffs, right? Or when you like certain types of music, like we can still exist within those, but still outside of those as well. Each of us as people are probably firmly rooted in several different tribes.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the thing, though. But when we get pushed outside of our own tribes, whatever 3 or 4 tribes we ascribe ourselves to, punk, Democrat, liberal, whatever, you know what I mean? Like there are so many different categories that we can put ourselves into. But the thing is that, we're having to go to work every day with people that we didn't grow up with that won't give us, the freedom to like be ourselves, man. And nor should they have to, really. There is a definite line. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, we all graduated college and went, oh, dude, I got to stop showing up in fucking makeup and fishnet arms for work. And we had to lay the goth shit in our fucking closet and go, well, that's over. And for some of us, we do that less because, it's not a big deal if we wear an X-Men shirt to work or, a Flash shirt. And there's plenty of clothing companies and apparel companies that are willing to come in and serve that need that go, okay, yeah, you're growing up, but you still want to wear cool shit. Fine, we gotcha. But the thing is, though, is that the breakdown of tribalism is happening on every level, and it's sort of like, I don't want to co-opt the term because our gay friends have had coming out of the closet for a long time, but like, dude, there is this whole like being honest with yourself process that happens where you're like, yeah, okay, like I like punk rock, but I also like to go to hip hop shows too. And like for some people that can be incredibly uncomfortable and they cling to those things like security blankets. They cling to those things that they identify, that self-identification, like a life raft, whether it's gamer, whether it's punk. There's like one little thing that you always fucking cling to. And for me, for a long time, it was either my musical taste or, like whatever that fucking self-identity is. That's really the breakdown of tribalism and going, well, I am that, but I am also these other things. And I'm not defined by that one characteristic. Listen, we've been reinforced with this kind of thinking for probably as long as most of us have been alive. Fucking PCU, Clueless, Revenge of the Nerds, High Fidelity, SLC Punk. All of these movies put us into this box and then say, this is your box, and now you have to clash with the other boxes.
I think, that's where the problem is, because there is nothing wrong with being put into these tribes or self-identifying with these tags, but you're right, there are certain people that when push comes to shove, get offensive about it. You mentioned how Anita Sarkeesian, feminist, scholar, and she's a gamer. A lot of people looked at that and goes, whoa, no,
you're not a gamer. You can't be a gamer.
You can't be all those things in a gamer. And it was like the fuel that was sparked the fire, basically.
Kyle, you can jump in here if you want.
No problem.
You don't have to wait for my cue either. You could just jump in.
Yeah.
No problem. So with the Sarkeesian thing, I mean, let's be honest, I'm not a fan of her either. Sorry. I mean,
because it turns out she doesn't play half the game she says she plays. That's my issue with her. She has these opinions because of what other people tell her to have. And for me, if I want to look for a feminist icon in gaming to like look up to, or to, I kind of want to know that she is actually forming her own opinions and that she actually has what's best for women in mind. But her opinion on Bayonetta will forever stump the hell out of me. So
and that's
I
can't follow that.
And that's fair. That's totally fair. That's a fair fucking opinion based on like, oh, she got that wrong.
You don't think that people have those opinions of us after watching a few of our shows?
I mean, come on. Like, there's more than a few things that we've gotten wrong.
She was so visible as a feminist icon in gaming that, like, and with her Kickstarter and everybody.
That's
like,
not her fault.
I mean, I know, but everybody wanted her to be that person that we could follow, and she didn't become that, and that's
fine. That's fine. But like Lloyd in the chat going, Anita's a shit stain. Why? Why is she a shit stain? And like that's the visceral reaction of and a lot of this came from going like, listen, gaming has a problem with women, and it's not gamers, and it's not just the industry, but in marketing and the way that games are designed, yeah, there's some fucked up shit that's going on here. For every wrong opinion that she had, she also did have some fucking valid points, and it was shit that I had noticed. Oh, hey, why is it that EverQuest has to put the half-naked blonde-haired, fucking mage on the cover of their shit, and, like, that's what they think is going to sell. Okay, I mean, I guess. But, like, it was, like, when you looked at that and it was the same amount of shit over and over and over again, because, yeah, that was sort of the trope, is, like, put the hot, drawing of the chick on the front of the cover, and you're going to sell 1 million copies. And for a while, that fucking worked. It actually did fucking work. And the conversation is, I think, the point about Sarkeesian that is important, because for all of the shit that she got wrong, she also forced a very important conversation in the macro terms.
And this is the message that I think you have to take away from this, everyone, Mika included, that wants to just be like, oh, well, Anita Sarkeesian, was a shit stain or she's wrong about stuff, is you don't have to be one or the other. You don't have to be painted as a villain or a hero. People can have opinions that are right and that are wrong. You can both agree and disagree with things.
And also, dude, people can't control how their product is received. Like, obviously, everyone who wants to make a product wants to make it successful. But when she started her Kickstarter, I don't know what the fuck her goal was, but, when she tripled it, quadrupled it, made it 10 times over, and then people are sitting around with like, yeah, well, she didn't release every video that she said she was going to. Ooh, that's embezzlement. Like, dude, you gave her your money over GoFundMe, which, if you read the fucking agreement, like,
that's her money.
After unlocking the amount of the visible, as visible of a shitstorm as she did, dude, I do not blame her for disappearing. I do not blame her at all, one iota, for disappearing after that whole thing, because, dude, it was a mess. It was a complete and utter fucking mess. But
there's something to be said about the transparency of shit like Kickstarter and GoFundMe. Like, if you say your money is going to be used for this, it better fucking be used for that. Like, what did she do with the rest?
Okay, how many indie games have not? Okay, Mighty Number 9. How many Kickstarted games have like not even met the bare expectations?
Oh, but a lot of them get torn to.
Most of them don't even come out.
Yeah, and a lot of times you see articles about that. But yeah, I agree. I think that...
articles, but like people aren't getting their fucking money back.
The inherent dangers of things like Kickstarter and GoFundMe is nothing new, but when they happen, people always act like they're so surprised that they got swindled or cheated out of something. Yeah. You should have known this going in. Yeah. It's a possibility.
Right.
Yeah, giving your money to something like that is always, like an honor system, a faith thing. You have to know what you're fighting for.
Does it suck? It sure does, but stop acting so surprised.
Right. No. And that's the thing, is that, people entering into the like Patreon with us or with Jim Sterling or anyone else, like, it's the same fucking thing. We're responsible for that, not Patreon. Mm-hmm. So, like, fine. If you didn't like her videos, that's fine. If you didn't pay for them, shut the fuck up, as far as I'm concerned. This is a really weird tangent because, as far as I can tell, she didn't even really have that much. She was more tangentially involved as a distraction to this whole point. Mm-hmm. Because, again,
definitely.
The point of the conversation, taken away from things like, harassing people and, some of the bad behavior that went on, the point was to drive a conversation.
Having a right or wrong opinion is okay, but even if your opinion is wrong does not mean others needs to be aggressive or lash out at you because your opinion is wrong and you need to lose a friendship over it.
Jesus, Melville, getting paid by the word. Listen, I agree with the sentiment, but that's what painful conversations do. And that's why I was criticizing I don't want politics in my games argument, because you can't avoid this kind of shit.
Always been in games.
Yeah. I mean, going as far back as a game having an opinion, or even if you really want to go
every Final Fantasy game ever.
Talk about the ESRB formation. Like, games and politics are intrinsically linked because games are media and politics is involved so heavily in our media that we can't separate the two.
I totally agree. The whole notion now if we don't want politics in games is so misguided, I guess, is the way to put it. The bigger problem was partly that, but also the whole idea that there was a group of people trying to push their agenda and their ideology into the gaming sphere forcibly instead of letting it happen naturally.
Right.
And a lot of people take note of that, and I was like, hold on. Let's take a minute and back this up a little bit. What are you trying to do, and why are you doing this?
Yeah, and I think that those are all fair questions. And, if we're going to be adults about this, and if we're going to have, if we're going to be the grown-ups in the room, because we are, I mean, I don't know about any of you guys. I'm 33. It's not counting down, okay? That if we're going to be the adults in the room, that we should be able to talk about this like adults. And that, getting bogged down in a whole bunch of side bullshit is really just tangential to the point. Because, listen, you can't remove politics from games. If you do, then you have Wolfenstein, where you're killing representations of a potential Nazi regime. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that our politics are at such extremes to where people are complaining about, oh, well, you're killing Nazis in this. Oh, well, Far Cry 5 is really offensive. Like, okay, fine. But those creators have a point of view, and they're allowed to pursue that all they fucking want. So,
definitely.
So, that whole backlash has really just unlocked the amount of stupid that is involved with the conversations. But, I think the most sensible points that I heard always centered around the ethics in games journalism points. So, Kyle, do you have a finer point to put on that?
Oh, sure. I think a lot of the ethics in game journalism is to separate your own personal ideology from objective-based content, let's say like a review or a news report, because a lot of the websites posting this content now is usually interlaced with the writer's own personal opinion about something that should be as simple as this game came out, or something more objective saying like, this game, I disagree with the concepts in this game because of these ideological views rather than the gameplay itself.
So,
and we're seeing that pushed more and more recently, and people are beginning to get a little tired of it, because reviews on a basic level should be buyer's guides for a product. Like, is the game good? YN.
So let's talk about some of the forces that enable something like this to happen, because I think that's really important to understand. Is that the way that games journalism was working before Twitch, because I think that you've got to look at this before Twitch and after Twitch. There's two different ways to be able to separate this.
BT and AT.
Before Twitch, you had a lot of gaming publications, gaming blogs, IGN, GameSpot, Game Informer. You had your G4s of the world. That these places were sometimes somewhat associated with with larger media organizations. But the way that each of those projects was able to fund itself was through advertising. And what were they advertising? They were advertising the games that they were supposedly criticizing. So what happens when you bite the hand that feeds? It stops feeding you. So what? Say that again.
Gerstmann with GameSpot.
So go ahead. I don't actually know. I'm assuming that you're talking about Jeff Gerstmann.
Yes.
Okay. So I remember this, but you sound like you can give it context.
Sure. Basically, Jeff did a review for Kane Lynch 2 back in the day. Yeah, that's a long time ago.
It's a really long time ago.
Yeah. But effectively, if you look at GameSpot while the game was about coming out a week before, there were ads everywhere for this thing, sidebars, loaders, animated ads everywhere. And then the game finally came out. He didn't take kindly to it. I forgot what the actual score was, but it was rather low.
It was bad. It was a shit game.
And Jeff lost his job over it.
Wow.
And is the reason why Giant Bomb now exists, because Jeff basically backed everything up and made Giant Bomb.
So let's, by the way, both of those companies now owned by CBS. So it's kind of a wash. Doesn't even really matter. So, all right. So if that's a problem, and I was able to identify that problem at 12, 13 years old after consulting a game pro, going, oh, this sounds like a game I'd like to buy, going out and buying it and going, oh, that's a complete and utter garbage piece of shit, and then returning it for a quarter of my money.
Aww.
Right? So you only need to do that a couple of times before you go, well, I don't trust this bullshit again. And then, the internet started to come out, and you had, IGN, and you had forums and GameFAQs, all different manner of ways to try to find who, to trust for selling games. And, GameSpot was one of them. IGN was one of them. You had these big breakout websites. And then you had the Kane and Lynch incident, and people started to question it. And so again, this is a well-documented problem. It's been a long-standing problem in the gaming world and predates Gamergate by quite a bit. All right.
Gamergate was more of a powder keg that was just growing of all these different issues that have been going on, and the Gamers Are Dead was kind of like the match.
So this is all kind of around the same time that G4 was unraveling and not really getting the financial support ad-wise that it needed to be able to prop up the business. And, you saw G4 go down. You saw a lot of these larger blogs start to consolidate and start to move their talent around. Destructoid, Escapist, a lot of these kind of secondary sites that people were going to. I think Escapist got absorbed by Smosh at some point. There's like a whole bunch of absorbing that goes on in this period. And then
last time I read, I think Escapist is done. I don't think outside of Yahtzee,
really?
I do not think there are any active staff at Escapist for weeks.
That's not that surprising, because they fucking shot themselves in the foot. Anyway, this gets us now to that's sort of like the early Twitch era, and now we're post Twitch, right? Like Twitch is a normal thing that everyone does from their second bedrooms, whatever.
And if you want to know what a game's like, go watch these actual gamers play the game. That seems perfect, doesn't it?
Exactly. Now, but there's a problem, though.
What's the problem?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I see more than a few people that we even know doing sponsored streams.
Oh, no.
Which means that, that's the game development company coming in and paying someone to stream their game.
Yep.
And,
corporatized the same way that everything before it was also corporatized.
And wouldn't you know it, when someone comes in and pays you money to play their game on your stream, wouldn't you fucking know it, it comes with some stipulations.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, I was going to say, if they're just paying you to play it, it depends on if they're paying you to say how good it is.
If they're paying you to play it, you can guarantee one of those stipulations is you can't say anything bad about it.
Now, that's the thing, is that if you're someone like, It's Me JP, or if you're someone like Lyric, you might be able to leverage around that and go, that's an interesting offer there, Clash of Clans, but I don't think I want to sign an agreement that says I can't say anything bad about your company. Yep. But enough people have to where now it's shifted off, the onus has shifted off of these unethical, quote unquote, game journalism sources and has been democratized out into the world of Twitch.
And while it's nice when people let you know that it's a sponsored stream.
Oh, well, no, they have to now because of the FTC.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they do have to.
They have to now, but they didn't for a while. They have to now. Yeah. That creates, I mean, it just seems like we've moved the football.
That's all that happens. Yeah, no, we absolutely saw what was going on in the landscape with these companies basically buying out these reviews and opinions, made our own little camp with blackjack and hookers, and then they're coming in and taking over that now too. What's next?
Pretty much. Kyle, we got to wrap up this segment. We got to wrap up this discussion, unfortunately, because we've got a long Checkpoint Radio podcast too coming up next. But before we let you go, are you seeing some of the same issues and ethical problems start to rise with Twitch streamers that maybe sparked action with Gamergate? Because I got to tell you, the more involved that I get into it, the more I come away thinking that there needs to be a firewall between even game streamers or game critics and the products that they're reviewing.
I totally agree, but of course the question is, where's the money? Who's getting paid? For at least for a Twitch streamer or a YouTuber, their reputation is their livelihood, and when that gets sullied, they're done for the most part. So that's a little safer than, say, a giant corporation that has multiple people that can absorb some of that blow. But if you're an individual trying to run a reputable, even if it's just for entertainment, and you're visibly lying about something, and people catch up on it and then expose you, you're kind of done. So it's a little more difficult.
I think you're far more optimistic than I am. Because I'll tell you what, I find it frustrating to go into someone's stream who I thought was a friend of mine, ask him to check something out that I had just spent, the better part of 3 hours working on, and then get met with a whole bunch of like, oh yeah, can we take that to the PMs? Can we take that to the PMs? No, motherfucker, how long have I known you? You let me drop a link, you fucking asshole. And that's the thing, is that no one reacts like that unless they've got a contract that they're trying to uphold. No one reacts like that. And I'm sorry, but that is a level of bullshit in the Twitch community. Like, again, I don't have to scratch very deep to be able to find this personally affects me. All I had to say was 2 tweets to get fucking death threats. And all I have to do is ask one person that I know who's like a, medium-sized streamer to, hey, check this out. Do a thing for me. And I'm getting a whole bunch of like, I don't know, man.
That is really suspect.
I gotta clear that, man.
Never had to clear it before.
Yeah, that's a strangely different tune than you were singing when you were coming to my channel for hosts. When you were coming to us to try to promote your channel. That's a slightly different fucking tune than you're singing. And I'm not going to
have a different perspective than I would, because you're on the inside seeing everything in the back, and I'm on the outside, cursory looking through everything. Listen, so it's interesting. I haven't considered that.
I mean, and the thing is that, and this is the frustrating thing, is that, I like these people, and I don't want to think of them as compromised. But now, I think that the way the video game companies, the developers, throw their money around to try to influence sentiment is fucked up. It's dirty. It's dirty. The only thing that you should be sending to people are review copies. And hey, if I get to it, that's good. But like every review code that I've ever been sent, you should see the laundry list of expectations that come along with. It's got to be finished by this date. You've got to have your review by this date. We'd like to see a proof of the review. Blah, 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 blah.
One of the reasons...
fucking, dude, stop jerking me off and just give me a copy of your $3.99 game and I'll talk about it if I fucking want to.
Yes. mass, and that's one of the reasons that I respect Penny Arcade so much. Is I remember an article they did where they basically mentioned, like, look, people try to get us to promote their games all the time, and the way that we look at it is send us your game for free, and if we like what we see, yeah, we'll talk about it, no charge at all. But if we don't like it...
you can do that if you're Penny Arcade. You can do that.
Yes, exactly.
You can do that if you're Lyric. You can do that if you're JP. Whatever. These big guys that have followings have a little bit of leverage. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm just saying that the ones that don't have leverages, that have no leverage, that are desperate to be able to make it because they quit their job to be able to do streaming because it's the thing that they love to do, and now they're making backroom deals that prevent them from giving opinions about things. And if that's not exactly the same fucking thing that people were rallying around, for like, hey man, like ethics in games journalism matter, well, don't ethics on Twitch matter too? Don't ethics on YouTube matter too?
Ethics everywhere matters.
Because when they don't, you get the adpocalypse. That's what you get. When you don't, when they don't, when ethics don't matter, when there is no bar that people have to live up to, you get 4 Tostino's pizza roll commercials in a row with like a fucking Battlefront 2 trailer. And as I send you guys into these commercials, I hope that's not what I'm sending you into.
It is.
Anyway, all right, guys, that's going to be it. Thank you, Kyle, for joining us. This was a great discussion, man.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and again, man, just... man to man, as people, I apologize for any of the bullshit that I may have projected at you, or any names that I may have called you, or any childish behavior that I may have had on display. It was an awkward time for all of us. But
No question. It was just weird seeing that people, that I play games with or enjoy are now on these different sides of the fence, and I'm just like, what happened?
Yeah,
I don't get it.
So I think that, if anything, we need to just continue the breakdown of tribalism. These little camps, that we put ourselves into, these little boxes that we end up putting ourselves into, that's the shit that needs to go away. That's the stuff that really does damage to us as people and our ability to communicate. All right, that's going to be it here for Final Encounter.